We left Belinda crying in a hallway in part 1. The same Belinda who, 8 months ago, stood in a soul downpour and banged on the window of a luxury car because a billionaire had drenched her, and she decided that being wealthy did not make you exempt from basic human decency. The same Belinda who walked into a Han family dinner with nothing but a burgundy dress, a law degree she wasn't currently using, and the kind of composure that takes real suffering to build, and held the entire room. The same Belinda who, when a woman walked into her workplace and threatened to expose her, invented a twin sister on the spot and made the woman leave in confusion. The same Belinda who sat across from the most powerful woman in the Han family and, when offered a buyout, countered with $100 million without blinking. The same Belinda who had come to South Korea with nothing after a man named Marcus Kweku Asante had taken her savings, her grandmother's jewelry for years of her life, and a loan in her name, and simply left. The same Belinda whose mother was lying in a hospital in Accra fighting a condition that cost a consistent, grinding, merciless amount of money every month. That Belinda, crying in a hallway. And now Han Ju-pyo, the cold, magnetic, impossibly complicated heir of the Han Group, who had waited outside a shopping mall for 2 hours and 32 minutes, was still outside. If this is your first time here, welcome to Afro-K Storified, where African and Korean drama collide and your heart signs a waiver. Subscribe right now. Drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching this from? I need to know. Now, back to Belinda. The evening air was cool and clean the way Seoul gets after 6 p.m., when the city exhales. The street lights were already on. Pedestrians moved past with the purposeful tempo of people who had somewhere to be. The black car was at the curb. Of course it was. Belinda walked toward it. She told herself she was walking toward it to tell him, calmly, clearly, with the same composure she had applied to every other difficult conversation in her life, that this was over. That whatever the strange, charged, impossible thing between them was, it had run its course. That she was sorry about the $100 million, and she was sorry about his mother, and she genuinely hoped he found whatever he was looking for. She told herself this. She believed approximately 40% of it. He stepped out of the car. And for a moment, just the half second before she put the armor back on, she felt the full weight of how much she had missed looking at him. How ridiculous that was. How entirely inconvenient. He was still as handsome as ever. That was objectively unfair. He should have looked worse. He should have looked like a man who was as terrible as she was the past week, crying herself to sleep and waking up with heavy eye bags and hope hanging on thin thread that he'd forgive her. Instead he looked like himself, long coat, dark eyes, the loose strands of his black hair falling across his jaw in the evening wind, except for one thing. He looked like he hadn't slept. Belinda. His voice was quiet. Not cold. Just careful, the way you are careful with something you have come close to breaking. Her heart raced. What was he here for? She didn't think her heart could take any more cracks. She didn't think banging on a sedan car under the rain would bring her to this point in life. Ju-pyo. She kept her distance. You waited 2 hours. 2 hours and 40 minutes, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. By the end. She blinked. You need to tell me what you want, she said. Because I can't keep. She should be apologizing. She didn't know the directions her tongue was moving today again. Just apologize and move past this. He isn't coming to take your job. He already told Mr. Park that your job was safe. So please do not ruin this. Her thoughts battled against her. He moved, but not towards her. He went down. Han Ju-pyo, 30 years old, CEO of Han Logistics International, the rebel of the most powerful chaebol family in Seoul, a man who communicated largely through silence and the studied arrangement of distance, went down on one knee on the pavement of a public street in Gangnam at 6:17 p.m. Belinda stopped breathing. Not metaphorically. Literally. She forgot to breathe for approximately 4 seconds. What was happening? She turned around. Was there a hidden camera? She pinched herself lightly. This was another dream. Her best friend, Yemi, would have a fit of laughter when she finally wakes. But for now, let her dream. Marry me, he said. She stared at him. What? She said. Marry me, he said again. Like it was a simple thing. Like he was ordering coffee. She pinched harder. Her skin was tender beneath her burgundy blazers. Her subconscious must be enjoying this a little too much to let it go. Now she had to live in this dream. "Get up," she said. "People are watching. Get up right now." In a moment, his eyes, oh, his dark piercing eyes that made her heart race, trained on hers. But she couldn't look away. It was as if she had been hypnotized. Ju Pyo managed to leave her lips. "Marry me, and I'll take care of your mother. Everything. The hospital costs, the medication, the specialist, all of it. Whatever she needs. I'll fly her here if you want. The best facility in Seoul." He looked up at her. No performance. No game face. Just him. Just, "Marry me." Belinda looked at this man kneeling on a public pavement with his long coat pooling around him and people already slowing their steps and reaching for their phones, and she thought, Of course this is happening. Of course this is my life now. This isn't a dream. Dreams don't look this way." She thought about her mother. She thought about the hospital in Accra and Dr. Mensah's carefully measured voice and the word managing instead of controlling. She thought about the $12,000 and the empty curb for 4 weeks. And here is where it gets complicated. Because this was the moment Belinda Smith made a decision that would change everything, and not in the way she expected. "Get up first," she said. He stood. "Tell me this isn't another game." Pause. Long enough that her stomach dropped. "It started as one," he said. "It isn't anymore." She held his gaze. She had spent months learning the grammar of this man, the way he communicated and what he didn't say, the way truth looked on his face when he stopped managing it. She looked at him now. She believed him, which was terrifying. She didn't know why this was happening. People don't move from crying at your corridor to ignoring you for 4 weeks to kneeling down on the street, asking you to marry them. "I didn't take the money," she exhaled. You went very still. "What?" "Your mother's offer. I didn't take it. I made the counteroffer and I walked out and I never went back and she never sent anything and I never asked." She crossed her arms. "So if you thought I was here because I was paid to be here, I wasn't. I was never paid." Something moved through his face. Slow. Seismic. "Then why did you say it?" he asked. "The 100 million. Why?" She looked at him for a long time. "Because she offered me money to leave you." She folded her arms. "It was crazy. So I thought if you were up for bargain, you should be worth a lot more than $1 million. The city moved around them. The evening continued its business. And Han Ju Pyo stood on a public pavement in Gangnam looking at a woman who had just disarmed him completely. He didn't know if he was to lift her up and swing her in the air or just kiss her. They were not there yet. He couldn't bring himself to do that. Something about her terrified him in the worst way possible. "So," she said, looking up at him. She was tall, but he towered over her comfortably. "Tell me exactly what this is. And don't play with me this time." Someone had filmed it. Of course someone had filmed it. By 8 a.m. the following morning, the video had been shared 47,000 times across Korean social media platforms. By noon it had crossed into international entertainment blogs. By 3 p.m., the headline that Belinda read on her phone during her lunch break, standing in the back stockroom of Han Prestige Mall with her braids pinned up and her hands slightly unsteady, read, "Han Ju Pyo proposes on street to mystery woman. Is the rebel heir finally off the market?" There was a photograph. From 3 different angles because apparently there had been 3 people filming. Han Ju Pyo on one knee in his long black coat, on the pavement of a Gangnam street. And Belinda, tall, slim, her long braids loose around her shoulders, her dark eyes wide with something the caption called shock but which was actually a very specific blend of terror, calculation, and something she still refused to name. She looked beautiful in the photograph. She almost didn't recognize herself. Yemi sent it at 8:47 a.m. with 6 consecutive emojis and the message, "Belinda Adiz Smith. I need you to call me immediately." Her mother's nurse sent a WhatsApp at 9:15 a.m. "Madam, we are seeing your picture everywhere. Mama is asking if it is you." She is excited. Her former law professor from Accra University sent a LinkedIn message at 11:30 a.m. "Congratulations on your engagement? Is this accurate?" Ann Park Hyun-soo appeared at her counter at 2 p.m. with an expression she had never seen on him before, which was the expression of a man who has realized he spent 3 weeks threatening to fire a woman who was apparently engaged to the owner of the building he worked in. "Miss Osei," he said. "Mr. Park," she said pleasantly. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Is there anything you need?" he said. "For your comfort while you're working." Belinda looked at him for one full, quiet second. The little evil her thought of 1,000 ways to make this moment epic. But she didn't have the energy for that right now. She was still unaware of what this new development brought with it. And Belinda hated uncertainties. "I'm fine," she smiled politely. "Thank you." He retreated. She allowed herself exactly one small, private smile. Then she went back to work. She realized the other staff were extra nice to her, that there were more sales on her counter than the past month combined, and when the day was over, she just wanted to run back home, have a quick shower, lay down and stare at her ceiling. Something she did whenever she was caught up in dilemmas like these. But here is what nobody on those blogs knew. Here is what no camera caught. In the car, the night before, after the pavement and the proposal and the 4 seconds where she forgot to breathe, Belinda and Jupyo had talked. For 2 hours. Parked outside her building, engine off, the city continuing its indifferent glow around them. 2 people in a car having the most honest conversation either of them had managed in a long time. "My family has been negotiating a merger with the O Group for 3 years, Jupyo said. "Seryung's family. The arrangement isn't just social, it's financial. If I marry her, it consolidates a shipping contract worth approximately $400 million over 10 years. He looked out the windshield. "My stepmother has been managing this for a long time." "And you don't want it," Belinda said. "I don't want to be managed," he said. "There's a difference." He didn't want to mention that he couldn't imagine being with a woman that wasn't Belinda. He wasn't sure how she would take it, so he was walking on thin ice. Belinda handed the phone back. She looked at the windshield for a moment. "You've been carrying this alone for a long time," he said. "Not a question." "Yes," she said. "You don't have to anymore." She didn't answer. His eyes were still on her, and suddenly the car had become too hot for the both of them. She got out of the car, said goodnight in a voice that was steadier than she felt, and went upstairs. She called her mother at 9:47 p.m. Mama Adwoa picked up on the second ring, which meant it was a good day. "Is that you in the photograph, Belinda?" she asked. "Yes, Mama." "He is tall," her mother said. "Yes, Mama." She knew there were lots of unanswered questions behind her voice, but she was too tired to ask them. Her energetic mother, who worked hard to send her daughter to the United States, was slowly becoming the shadow of herself. "Is he kind?" Belinda thought about a man who waited 2 hours and 40 minutes, who said her mother's name before asking for hers, who cried one tear in a corridor and didn't wipe it away. "I think he's trying to be," she said. Her mother made a sound that was partly prayer and partly the particular satisfaction of a woman who has worried long enough and is temporarily relieved. "Then go carefully," Mama Adwoa said. "But go." Belinda swallowed hard. She didn't want her mother to know she had been crying. Her mother had become more accepting of her outrageous choices. It was either because of old age or the sickness. They had fought a lot when she was younger. Belinda recalled the whooping she got when her mother caught her kissing a boy in their living room at 16. And how her mother's prayers included Belinda not coming back home with a teenage pregnancy. It's crazy how time flies, how our young vibrant parents become weak and old. How it started from a few white strands in their hair to wrinkles and weak bones. Time wasn't waiting for her to make her mother proud like she had always wanted. If you're feeling things right now, and I know you are, drop a comment. What do you think Jupyo has to say about the Han family? Is there something Belinda should be wary of? What do you think of Mama Adawa? Did Belinda make the right call? Hit that like button. It costs nothing and it means everything to this channel. Now, keep watching. The first public date was a dinner at a restaurant in Itaewon that had a waiting list of 4 months and was, apparently, waived entirely when your fiancé called ahead. Belinda wore deep green, a dress she had bought herself from a market near her apartment, because she had decided early on that if she was going to do this, she was going to do it on terms that included some things that were entirely hers. The photographers were outside before they arrived. She had known they would be. She had prepared herself for it the way you prepare for a cold shower. You decide it's happening, you commit, and you do not flinch when the water hits. She did not flinch. She walked through that entrance on Han Jupyo's arm, tall, slim, her braids loose and perfect, her bright brown eyes looking straight ahead, and she looked, by every account that appeared on the blogs by morning, like a woman who had been born to walk into rooms that were not expecting her. Inside she was extremely nervous. Inside, Jupyo leaned close to her ear as they were seated and said very quietly, "You look like you own this restaurant." "I'm pretending," she said just as quietly. "Don't stop." He smiled those magic smiles of his. "It's working." She laughed. Genuinely. And he looked at her when she laughed, that particular way he had developed, the way you look at something you want to memorize, and Belinda made a note to stop laughing like that around him, or at minimum to stop noticing when he looked. She was not successful on either count. The dates continued. A gallery opening in Mapo that had been curated by a friend of Jupyo's from university. She had not known he had friends from university, had barely been able to imagine him as a university student. And then she met the friend, a cheerful architect named Park Sungjin, who told her 3 different embarrassing stories about Jupyo within the first 15 minutes, and she revised her entire understanding of who this man had been before the world pressed him into his current shape. "He wasn't always this serious," Sungjin said confidentially, while Jupyo was across the gallery talking to someone. "He used to be, well, loud actually, in university, before his mother died." Belinda looked across the gallery. Jupyo was standing in front of a large abstract piece, deep indigo and gold, with his hands in his pockets and his long coat on and his hair half-tied, and from here at this angle, he looked like someone who had built himself very carefully out of whatever materials were left after a loss he'd never fully recovered from. "He told me about her," Belinda said. Sungjin looked at her with an expression she couldn't entirely decode. "He told you," he said. "About his mother." "Yes." Another pause. Sungjin nodded slowly. "Then you know more than most people who've known him for years." Belinda filed this away. She filed a lot of things away in those weeks. She was good at filing, at collecting information and holding it carefully and waiting for the moment it would be needed. It was, she thought, probably a lawyer's instinct. It was possibly also the instinct of someone who had been caught off guard one too many times and had decided to know everything she could about every room she was in. The third date was quieter. Just the 2 of them, no photographers, no gallery friends, no performance. He had texted her, "Are you free Sunday?" "Not for photos." She had written back, "Where?" "Anywhere you choose." She had chosen the Han River. Because it was theirs, in a small, private way that neither of them had said out loud but both of them knew. The first real conversation had happened there. The tteokbokki and the midnight and his mother's name. They walked for a long time without talking much. This was something she had learned about him. Silence with Han Jupyo was never awkward. It had a texture, full rather than empty, the way silence is between people who are comfortable with each other's presence. She had not had that with Jerry. Jerry had filled every silence with himself, urgently, like silence was a threat. Jupyo just walked beside her. Eventually he said, "Tell me about before Seoul." Before Jerry. She looked at the river. She had discussed about a lot of things. Her time in New York, the missed job opportunities in London because Jerry insisted they had a better life in New York. How she believed him because she was in love with him. Now when she thought of it, it was stupid. But she was done blaming herself for the lost 4 years. She was here now with Jupyo beside the Han River, and she didn't want to talk about Jerry. She would talk about her days in Accra. "There was a version of me," she said slowly, "before the law degree and definitely before New York. I was this rebellious child." Jupyo snickered. "What?" She asked why he was suppressing his laughter. Jupyo didn't want to tell her that she was still her rebellious self. He didn't want to interrupt her. "My father had just died and my mother didn't shed a tear and I was angry for a long time. She gave herself into so much work. Cooking wache in the morning, selling second-hand clothes in the evening, and in between hawking pepper. We struggled. My father's brothers took everything my parents worked together for. I studied law to get back at them and take back everything that was stolen from us. Jupio was quiet. He wanted to know what stood behind the tough exterior Belinda had. It was just me and my mother. I started looking for ways to get a reaction from her. I brought boys home. It was nothing serious. My mother got called severely in school because I was caught skipping classes. She swallowed. I finally got the reaction. She looked up, holding back her tears. I'm such a terrible daughter. Jupio touched her wrist. I started smoking and took drugs out of curiosity. I was hurting. And I was alone. Then I heard my mother cry. Belinda sniffed. She still remembered the night after Mama Adawa yelled at her. Her mother cried bitterly in her room. It was the first time I heard her crying. Then I swore, she continued, I would not hear that sound again. I was going to make her proud and move mountains if that was possible for her. I told my mother the next morning that I was going to study law. She doubted me for a while till I started getting good reports from school. And then she fell sick, I lost my job, I became bankrupt, and it looked like I was failing my mother once again. Belinda didn't believe that she was going to say all of this. Jupio was such a good listener. He would make a good cat. He had offered her a handkerchief. She used it to cover her ugly cry. Do you miss your dad? He asked. More than you know. Belinda answered he was my best friend. My mother was jealous of our friendship. But right now I don't remember a lot about him. It's been 15 years since he died. She tried to not cry this time again. I know that feeling, he said. After my mother died. I kept trying to remember the sound of her voice and I couldn't. I couldn't. He stopped. I still can't. They stood by the railing. The city glittered below them with its usual magnificent indifference. I think, Belinda said carefully, that you have been very lonely for a very long time. He didn't answer. Which was an answer. She didn't push. She had learned the geography of this man well enough to know when a silence was a door and when it was a wall. And this one was a door, slightly open, held by someone who hadn't decided yet whether to let it swing. She let it be. They bought tagbaki from the same cart. She looked at him from the corner of her eye and he was looking at her from the corner of his, and they both looked away at exactly the same moment, and she thought, this is a problem. This is a very real problem. The ride back home was quiet. A comfortable silence, and she felt closer to him. The kind of quiet that happens after midnight in a neighborhood that has finished its evening and hasn't started its night yet. The street lights were on. The air was cool. They got down from the car and were walking to her block. Their footsteps were the loudest thing on the block. Then he said her name. Belinda. She stopped and turned. He was already close. She hadn't noticed him close the distance. Or she had noticed and had been studying the streetlight instead, which was a choice she could not entirely defend. He lifted his hand and moved one of her braids back from her face. Very slowly. The way you do something when you want to be sure the other person is not going to step back. She did not step back. His dark eyes held hers for a long moment, that cold, intelligent, guarded gaze that had, over weeks and conversations and rivers and late nights, quietly, stubbornly thawed into something she did not have a clean word for. He kissed her. It was something he had always wanted to do since the first day she stood in front of his car, yelling at him at the dressing room and beside the railing at Han River. And she responded. And for a moment on a quiet Hongdae street under a single streetlight, everything was uncomplicated. Everything was exactly and only this. Then it was over. They looked at each other. Good night, he said low. Good night, she replied shyly. He walked her to her building. She went up alone. She pressed the lift button and leaned against the wall and smiled at the ceiling of a very small elevator in a way that she would have been embarrassed about if anyone had seen her. Nobody saw her. She let herself have it. She pushed open her front door. It was already open. It was neither broken or forced. Just not fully closed. The way it looks when someone who knows how has let themselves in. Yemi had a night shift and there was no way she was back at this time. She had called earlier to confirm that she wasn't in the building. Her hand reached for her phone. She had started to dial when a voice came from the dark corner of her living room. It's just me. Belinda's blood went cold. She knew that voice. She had spent 4 years attached to that voice and 8 months trying to forget what it sounded like. The light clicked on. Jerry Kweku Asante was sitting in her armchair. He had not changed. That was, somehow, the most infuriating thing. She had imagined him changed, diminished, somehow, in the way that people who do terrible things ought to look diminished when you see them again. Hollowed out by what they'd done. Tired, at least. Jerry looked fine. He was wearing a jacket she didn't recognize, knew clearly, and his hair was shorter than when she'd last seen him, and he had the particular expression of a man who has rehearsed what he planned to say and was confident in the rehearsal. You should lock your door properly, he said. Belinda stood in the doorway. Her phone was still in her hand. How did you get in here? She said. The building manager. I told him I was your cousin. People believe what you tell them if you say it the right way. The way he said it, as if to mock her for believing him all those years ago. Now she knew who he was, she would never repeat that mistake with anyone else. He spread his hands. I've been in Seoul for 2 weeks, Belinda. I've been trying to reach you. You have my number, she said. You blocked me. Yes, she said. I did. He stood up. He was tall, almost as tall as Ju Pyo, she thought, and immediately hated herself for the comparison. I know what you're thinking, Jerry said. But I came to apologize. I've been working on myself. Therapy. The whole thing. I know what I did to you was. You took a loan in my name, Belinda said. He faltered. I was in a bad place. $12,000, Jerry. In my name. That I've been paying off for over 10 months on a retail salary. I'm going to fix that. That's why I'm here. I want to fix everything. She looked at him. He looked back with that expression she had once loved. Earnest, open, the look of a man who had the ability to make you feel like you were the only person in the room. She had spent 4 years believing that look. Leave, she said. Belinda, I want you out of my apartment in the next 30 seconds or I'm calling the police. And given that you broke in here, they'll have questions. Something shifted in his face. The rehearsal slipped. I saw you tonight, he said. Different tone now. Flatter. With him. Outside. He tilted his head. I saw you kiss him. Belinda said nothing. She was wrong about nobody seeing them. You disgust me, Marcus said, his face changed into a frown. You know that? You always had this thing about being above it all. Too good. Too principled. And now look at you. Playing house with some Korean billionaire because you couldn't make it on your own. His voice dropped into something harder. Social climbing. Sleeping your way into a family because you're a nobody now and you know it. The room was very still. Belinda looked at him. He was saying all of this to crumble her and she wasn't confident enough to say it wasn't. But she would never give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had known this was under the rehearsal. She had known from the moment he started talking that the apology was a corridor and this was the room at the end of it. This was always what it had been, this diminishing, this particular weapon that only works on people who are already afraid they might be right. She was not afraid she was right. Not anymore. You should leave, she said, quietly, with a finality that had nothing aggressive in it. The door opened. Han Ju-pyo stepped in. He was still in his coat. He had not, it turned out, driven away. He had been sitting in the car below, watching the lights in her window, and when the window showed 2 shadows instead of 1, he had come back. He looked at Jerry. Jerry looked at him. The room had a particular quality in that moment, the quality of a very short countdown. Are you here to save the damsel in distress? Marcus mocked. Say that again. Ju-pyo sneered, crossed the room in 3 steps, daring him. Belinda had seen this look before, the day she had first seen him. He looked angry and cold that day, but he had it controlled. But she didn't know about now. Run away, boy. You can't use money to win this. Ju-pyo didn't allow him to finish his statement. He hit him. Not wild. Not uncontrolled. 1 clean, specific punch. The kind thrown by someone who has been very angry for exactly long enough to know where to put it. Jerry hit the wall. He looked surprised. Ju-pyo. Belinda moved forward. He was already stepping back. He shook out his hand once, looked at Marcus against the wall with an expression that was not satisfaction but was something adjacent to it, and then looked at Belinda. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No." "Was that?" "Are you hurt?" he said again. "No," she said. "I'm fine." He nodded. Then he looked back at Jerry, who was holding his jaw and looking between them with an expression that had lost all its rehearsal. "Leave Seoul," Jupyo said. He said it the way he said most things. Quietly, without theater, with the specific gravity of someone who does not make statements they don't mean. "Don't come back." Jerry straightened. Something complicated moved across his face. Anger, calculation, something else she couldn't read. Then he picked up his jacket and left. "This is only the beginning, Belle." The door closed. Silence. "You didn't have to do that," Belinda said. "No," he agreed. "I could have handled it." "I know," he said. "You've been handling things alone for a long time." He looked at her directly. "You don't have to." She looked at him in her apartment in the late-night Seoul quiet. His coat, his hair, the hand he'd shaken out once and was now perfectly still, and felt something shift in her chest. The last piece of something. A small, stubborn, armored thing that had been holding out, that had been saying, "Careful, careful, you've been wrong before." It didn't move entirely, but it moved. And then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. An unknown number. Korean prefix. He almost didn't answer. She saw him hesitate, that micro-expression of someone who is tired and standing in a moment they don't want interrupted. He answered. He said in Korean a greeting. And then he went very still. The kind of still that is not calm but its opposite. The stillness of someone whose entire system has just received information it does not know what to do with. Belinda watched his face. She watched the color leave it. Not dramatically. Just incrementally, the way the light changes at the end of a day. Like something was being taken from him and replaced with something else that had no name yet. He said one word in Korean. She had learned enough by now to know what it meant. "Mother?" Belinda's breath stopped. She watched him listen. She watched his hand tighten on the phone. She watched his jaw set and then release and then set again. She watched the man who had learned to be cold, who had built distance into the architecture of himself because warmth had been taken from him when he was 19 years old, come apart very quietly in the middle of her living room. The call lasted 4 minutes. When he lowered the phone, he did not speak for a long time. "Ju Pyo." Her voice was soft. "What happened?" He looked at her. His eyes, those dark, guarded, magnetic eyes, were the eyes of a 19-year-old boy who had stood at a funeral and believed what he was told. "She's alive," he said. Belinda said nothing. She waited. "My mother," he said. "She's alive. She didn't die." His voice was completely flat with the effort of holding its own weight. "She's been alive for 11 years. He didn't know whether to be happy or feel betrayed. The city outside continued. Indifferent and bright. Belinda took one step toward him. She did not touch him. She just stood close. The way you stand next to someone who is standing at the edge of something very high, not holding them back, just being there. Solid. Present. He exhaled. Long, shaking slightly. "Someone planned it," he said. "Someone made her disappear." His jaw tightened. "And I think I know who." Subscribe to AfroK Storified right now. Notifications on, because what comes next dismantles everything. Drop a comment. Did you see this coming? I want to know. Her name before she was Mrs. Han was Obiasio. Secretary Obiasio. She had come to the Han Group 22 years ago as a junior executive assistant to Han Jong-soo, the patriarch, the grandfather who had built the company from a Busan shipping dock and who still came to family dinners because dying on a schedule was for lesser men. She had been 28. She had been extraordinarily capable. She had also, within 2 years of her appointment, been in love with a man who was married to someone else. Ju Pyo told Belinda this at 1 a.m., sitting on her floor with his back against the sofa, his coat off for the first time she could remember, his long hair coming loose from its tie. She sat across from him, cross-legged on the floor, and listened. "My mother's name was Han Soo-yun," he said. "I told you that. What I didn't tell you, what I didn't know until tonight, is that she didn't have a cardiac event. She was pressured to leave. Threatened. By Se-young. By Obaisio, who at the time was still Secretary O, he said, who had spent 2 years positioning herself to be indispensable to my father, and who had decided that the only way to become Mrs. Han was to make sure my mother stopped being Mrs. Han first. He looked at his hands. My mother was ill. Genuinely. She had been diagnosed with something that required long-term treatment. Obaisio found out. She threatened to have my mother's medical situation made public, with implications, manipulated implications about her fitness as a wife and mother. In 2003 in this family that was sufficient. He paused. My mother left. She disappeared. And 4 months later she was reported dead. Heart failure. My father grieved. He believed it. I believed it. He looked up. We all believed it because the only person who knew the full truth had arranged the truth very carefully. Belinda was quiet for a moment. Where has she been? She asked. Japan, he said. Osaka. She remarried. She has a daughter. His voice did something complicated on the word daughter. She's been watching from there. She saw the proposal on the news. She recognized me. He stopped. She said I looked like her. He wanted to smile, but suppressed it. Belinda looked at him. This man who had been cold because warmth had been taken from him, who had built distance like architecture, who had said, by a river at midnight, that he kept trying to remember the sound of his mother's voice and couldn't. She wanted to reach across and take his hand. She did. He looked down at her hand over his. He didn't move. He just held still the way you hold still when something feels fragile. She wants to meet, he said. Will you go? Yes. No hesitation. But I need to understand the full picture first. If Sejong, if Obaisio knew that my mother was alive and chose to keep that from my father, from me for 11 years, that's not a family drama. That's fraud. That's a legal case. He looked at Belinda. That's your territory. She blinked. You have a law degree, he said. You worked international contracts. This touches Korean family law, inheritance law, potentially corporate governance given what my father may have decided differently if he'd known his first wife was alive. He paused. I need someone I trust to understand what this means legally before I walk into it. Belinda was quiet for a moment. She thought about Park Hyun-soo saying, Miss Smith, this is your final warning. She thought about 8 months of luxury accessories counter and $12,000 of debt and Seoul refusing to become the clean start she had needed. She thought about 4 years of law and 2 summers in New York and a plan that had been genuinely good before someone took it from her. Okay, she said. Okay. I'll look at it. I'll understand what you're dealing with. She held his gaze. But Ju Pyo, if Sejong finds out we know. She'll move, he said. Yes. I know. How long do we have before she knows? A few days. Maybe a week. She has sources everywhere. That's how she operates. He ran a hand through his hair, loosening it further. Jerry, he said suddenly. Belinda went still. He wasn't here by accident, Ju Pyo said. He came to Seoul 2 weeks ago. He got into your building by claiming to be family. He sat in your apartment and waited. He looked at her steadily. Someone sent him. The air between them changed. You think? I think Sejong has been more active than we knew, he said. I think she found out about your past and she found Jerry and she put him in front of you to destabilize everything. To remind you of what you'd left. To make you feel small. His jaw tightened. It almost worked. Belinda thought about Jerry in her armchair. The rehearsed apology. The pivot to cruelty when the apology didn't land. Social climber. Nobody. She thought about how close she had been to believing it for just 1 second. That old, familiar, terrible second where someone who knew you before you were strong says something and you almost listen. He shook hands with her, she said. Not a question. Almost certainly, Ju Pyo said. Belinda looked at the ceiling. She's more dangerous than I thought, she said. Yes, he said. She is. The night deepened around them. Seoul glowed through the window. And Belinda sat on the floor of her apartment at 1:30 a.m. with the hand of a man who had just found out his mother was alive, and she thought, this is not the story I thought I was in. This had never been a simple fake dating story. This was something older. Something that had been building for 11 years before she ever stepped off a plane in Seoul, before she ever ran through the rain on Gangnam-daro, before she ever knocked on a window. She had walked into something already in motion. The question was what to do now. And then the answer arrived. In a form she did not expect. It was a Thursday. Belinda was at her counter. She had told Ju Pyo she wanted to keep working, at least until they had a clearer picture of the situation, because she had learned a long time ago that routine was protective. When Miss Shin appeared, not to shop, Belinda could tell the difference. Miss Shin, serene, immaculate, unshockable, placed a small envelope on the counter and said very quietly, "For Mrs. Han. She asked that you read it today." Then she left. Belinda waited until her lunch break. She went to the stockroom. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single card, cream with the Han family crest. 6 lines, handwritten in careful English. The last 2 lines read, "Your mother's safety depends on the choices you make in the next 72 hours. Think carefully, Miss Smith. You have something to lose now." Belinda read it twice. Then she sat on the stockroom floor, which was where she had cried for 9 minutes on a different, less dangerous day, and she understood with absolute clarity that this had moved from complicated to something that required a decision she could not postpone. She could not put her mother's life at risk. Whatever she felt, whatever was building between her and Ju Pyo on riverside walks and Hongdae streets and living room floors at 1 a.m., whatever law degree and backbone and borrowed courage she had, her mother was lying in a hospital in Accra and she was not untouchable. Belinda folded the card. She put it in her pocket. She went back to work, and she started to think about flights to Accra. She didn't tell him immediately. That was the part she would carry with her the longest. The 4 days between reading the card and saying the words. 1 week of public appearances and private conversations and the continued, deepening, inconvenient truth that Han Ju Pyo had become necessary to her in a way that had nothing to do with the arrangement and everything to do with who he was when nobody was watching. 1 week of knowing what was coming and choosing not to say it yet. She quit the mall on Tuesday. Not because the job had been taken from her. Because she had noticed in the week after the card that she was being watched. Not obviously, nothing so crude as a person standing outside. But the kind of watching that happens through other people. A new customer who asked odd questions, a colleague who appeared to report upward to someone who reported upward to someone Belinda couldn't see. Sejong's architecture. Everywhere. She thanked Park Hyun-soo. He shook her hand with the expression of a man who understood, belatedly, that he had misjudged the entire situation from the beginning. "You were always good at the job," he said, which was as close as he could apparently get to an apology. She smiled pleasantly. "Thank you." She walked out of Han Prestige Mall for the last time on a Tuesday afternoon with her bag over her shoulder, her braids loose, her bright brown eyes pointed forward. She didn't look back. She had stopped doing that. She told him on Wednesday night. They were in his car, the same black car, the same leather interior, soul through the windows. It had become, she realized, the place where honest things happened between them. The place where the performance fell away. "I'm leaving," she said. She heard him breathe. "Seoul?" he asked. "South Korea," she said. "I have to go to Accra." Silence. "Show me what she sent you," he said. She handed him the card. You read it? She watched his jaw tighten in the way it did when something moved through him that he was keeping at the surface rather than in. "This is leverage," he said. "She's bluffing." "She wouldn't." "She made your mother disappear for 11 years, Belinda said quietly. "I don't think she has a ceiling." He was silent for a long time. He was looking for the right words to say. They had gotten so close that letting her go felt like letting another important person to him go. Again. "I can have your mother moved," he said, his eyes wide in desperation. "A facility here or somewhere Sejong has no reach." "In 72 hours, she said. "With Sejong watching every move we make?" She said the choices in the next 72 hours. She shook her head. "I'm not risking my mother on the assumption that a woman who has been doing this for 11 years will somehow be outmaneuvered before the deadline." "Then let me go with you." He sounded desperate now. Scared even? His feelings had been building up for a while, and even if he hadn't mustered up the courage to tell her, it was sitting idly somewhere in his mind, waiting for the day he'd say it out loud. No, Belinda said. Belinda, Jupio started. No. She turned to look at him properly. If you leave Seoul right now, she wins. Everything she's been managing, everything your mother has been hidden from, it needs you here. Conscious and present and building the case. She held his gaze. You found out your mother is alive. You need to go to Osaka. You need to get the full story from her. You need to take it to someone legally. You cannot do any of that if you're following me to Accra. He looked at her. The old coldness was not there. It had not been there for weeks, not really. It surfaced occasionally as habit and then receded. What was there instead was something rawer. Something that had not had practice. Come back, he said. It was not a command. It was barely even a request. It was the sound of someone who has lost people before and recognizes the beginning of another loss and is trying to say something without asking for something they don't have the right to ask for. I don't know what comes next, she said. Come back anyway. She looked at him for a long time. When it's safe, she said. When my mother is safe and Se-young doesn't have her leverage anymore, I'll come back. That's not, he started again. It's what I have right now, she said. I'm sorry. She booked a 6 a.m. flight. Thursday. She packed one bag because she had started this journey with almost nothing, and packing light had become both habit and philosophy. Yemi drove her to the airport at 4 a.m. They didn't talk much. Yemi had the particular understanding of someone who had watched the whole story unfold and knew that the moment did not need commentary. She played music, soft, the kind that runs under things, and drove through a Seoul that was dark and quiet and just beginning at the edges of the horizon to think about morning. At the departure terminal, Yemi held her for a long time. You're coming back, Yemi said. Statement, not question. Yes, Belinda said. I'll keep your room. Belinda laughed, wet short. Don't. I'll find something better when I come back. She wasn't sure this would happen, she just didn't want to keep anyone's hopes up. It would be too heartbreaking. Look at you, Yemi said, pulling back to look at her. You came here with nothing and now you're leaving with a whole Chable in love with you. He's not. Belinda. She stopped. He waited 2 hours and 40 minutes, Yemi said. He punched your ex. He went on one knee on a public street. She raised an eyebrow. The man is in love with you. Say it back when you're ready and not before. Belinda squeezed her hand and walked through the doors. She did not look back. She never did. He was there. Of course he was there. Han Ju-pyo, in his long black coat, standing in the departures hall with his hair half-tied and several strands falling across his jaw, looking like the most out-of-place and entirely correct thing in the building. You followed me, she said. I drove myself, he tried to joke. Technically different. Ju-pyo. I know, he said. I know you have to go. I know the reasons. I know you're right about all of it. He took one step toward her. I just needed to see you one more time before the flight. She looked at him. Tall, dark-eyed. A few strands across his jaw. The man who had been cold because warmth had been taken from him and who had, over months and late nights in Takbaki by a river, very quietly stopped being cold. She reached up. She put her hand against the side of his face. Just for a moment. He closed his eyes. Go to Osaka, she said softly. Find your mother. Build the case. Don't let Se-young win. Come back to me, he said before squeezing a small paper into her hand. Open it when you get on the flight. She looked at it, then at him. She picked up her bag. She walked to security. She did not look back, but she felt him watching until she turned the corner and the terminal swallowed her. The flight took off at 6:09 a.m. She watched Seoul from the window as it became smaller, the Han River catching the first light, the buildings receding, the city that had broken her and rebuilt her and given her something she hadn't been looking for shrinking to a grid and then to nothing. She pressed her forehead against the glass. She breathed. Then she opened the piece of paper and read the 4 words Han Ju-pyo had taken his time to write. They were just 4 words, but they made tears roll down her cheek. 40,000 feet below, Han Ju-pyo stood in the departures hall of Incheon Airport and watched the boards update and felt the particular specific weight of someone who has just watched a flight take off carrying the one person they should have said more to. He reached into his coat pocket for his phone. It was already ringing. Unknown number. Korean prefix. The same prefix as before. He answered. A woman's voice. Older. Warm in the way that warmth sounds when it has been kept somewhere cold for a very long time. Jupyo, she said. His breath caught. Is this really? It's me, she said. I'm in Seoul. I came last night. I couldn't wait any longer. Pause. There are things you need to know. About Obiasio. About your father. About what was taken from you. Her voice tightened. About why none of this happened by accident. Ju Pyo stood in the departures hall. 40,000 feet above him, Belinda's flight crossed the coast. 11 years of buried truth was 3 words away from surfacing. Tell me everything, he said. And that right there, is where part 2 ends. Belinda is in the air, flying toward a mother whose safety has been used as a weapon. Han Ju Pyo is in an airport, about to hear the full truth from the woman he mourned for 11 years. Marcus left the apartment, but nobody tracked where he went after that. Ann Obiasio, formerly Secretary O, currently Mrs. Han Se-young, is somewhere in a compound in Songbuk-dong, unaware that the thing she buried 11 years ago has just picked up the phone. Now tell me in the comments, what did you think was written on the piece of paper? Do you think Belinda would come back? Part 3 is going to be different. Part 3 is where it all comes apart. And then, if they are brave enough, comes back together. Subscribe to Afro K Storified right now. The notification bell. Turn it on. Drop a comment below. What did you not see coming? And if this story has been living in your chest for the last hour, like this video and share it. Let the world find Afro K Storified. Part 3 is coming. And it will not be gentle.